They kept driving through my land like they owned it, every single day. Same trucks, same route, right through the middle of my ranch. I posted no trespassing signs. They ignored them. I called the sheriff. Nothing happened. I sent legal letters. They laughed them off. And the worst part, some of those vehicles had police lights on top. Now you might be thinking, maybe they had a legal right to be there. Maybe there was some kind of easement or road agreement. That's exactly what I thought too. So I asked for proof. They couldn't show me a single document. Not one, but they kept coming anyway, day after day. Like my fence didn't exist. Like my land was just a shortcut. Like my no meant absolutely nothing. What they didn't know was I was watching. I was documenting. And I was quietly planning something they never saw coming. See, there was a reason they wanted access to my land so badly. There was a reason they sent offer after offer trying to buy my ranch. And there was a very specific reason they got angrier every time I said no. This is that story. And trust me, it gets much worse before it gets better. I've owned this ranch for over 20 years. It wasn't handed to me. I didn't inherit it. I worked for every single acre, saved up for years. Made sacrifices most people wouldn't even consider. And the day I finally signed those papers, I remember standing at the edge of the property just looking out at the land. Feeling something I can only describe as complete. This wasn't just real estate to me. This was everything. The ranch sits on about 340 acres of open land, good soil. Natural water sources running through the property. Tall grass that goes golden in the summer. Quiet mornings where the only thing you hear is wind moving through the trees. If you've ever lived on land like this, you know exactly what I mean. There's a kind of peace out here that money genuinely cannot buy. And I built something real on this land. Cattle operation on the east side. A small but productive hay field running along the lower stretch. Fencing I put up myself over years of weekends and early mornings. A gate at the main entrance that I built with my own hands. Every post, every rail, every hinge. My neighbors knew me. The local farming community knew me. I was just a guy working his land and keeping to himself. Living the kind of life that most people dream about on their lunch breaks. But here's the thing about land like mine. When it's positioned in the right location, and mine happened to be sitting right between a growing town and a major highway, it becomes something else entirely to the wrong kind of people. It stops being a ranch. It stops being someone's home and life's work. It becomes an opportunity, a development target, a number on a spreadsheet somewhere in a corporate office. I didn't know that yet, not fully. I had noticed the town growing, new subdivisions popping up not too far from my fence line, traffic picking up on the road that runs along my eastern boundary. A few strangers slowing down near my gate and just looking. At the time, I didn't think much of it. I should have paid closer attention. Because while I was out there feeding cattle and fixing fences and living my life, someone else was already making plans for my land. Big plans. And they had absolutely no intention of asking for my permission. It started with a letter, just a plain white envelope sitting in my mailbox one Tuesday morning. I almost didn't open it right away. I figured it was something routine, a utility bill maybe, or some local newsletter I never signed up for. But when I opened it, I read it 3 times, because I couldn't quite believe what it said. It was from something called the Ridgeline Community Property Association. And it was informing me, not asking me, informing me that my ranch was now under their jurisdiction. That I was required to follow their community guidelines. That I owed back dues dating several months prior, and that failure to comply would result in fines and potential legal action. I had never heard of this organization in my life. I called my neighbor down the road. He got the same letter, called another neighbor 2 miles out, same letter. None of us had ever voted for this. None of us had ever signed anything agreeing to be part of any association. Nobody had ever knocked on our doors and explained what this was or where it came from, so I started digging. I went to the county clerk's office and asked about this Ridgeline Community Property Association. The clerk searched their records. It took a while, and what they found was almost nothing. The filing was incomplete. The documentation was thin. The organization had been registered quietly with minimal paperwork and almost no transparency about who was actually running it. No proper election, no community vote, no legitimate formation process. This was not a real HOA, not in any legal sense that actually held weight, but they were acting like one. Sending out official-looking letters with bold headers and legal-sounding language designed to make people panic. Designed to make regular working people think they had no choice but to comply. And that's exactly what some of my neighbors did. They just paid. Because the letters looked serious enough and nobody wants a legal fight over a few $100s. I understood that. I really did. But something about this felt deeply wrong to me. It wasn't just about the money. It was about the principle. Someone had manufactured authority over my private property without my knowledge or consent, and I needed to find out exactly who was behind it. Because I had a feeling this letter wasn't the beginning of the story. It was just the opening move. 2 weeks after that first letter, I got a visitor. A man in a silver sedan pulled up to my gate. Expensive suit, polished shoes, the kind of smile that looks rehearsed in a mirror. He introduced himself as a land acquisition specialist working with a development group. Said he happened to be in the area and wanted to talk about potential opportunities. I knew exactly why he was there. He didn't waste much time with small talk. He told me the region was growing fast, that my land was positioned perfectly for development, that I could make a significant profit if I was willing to sell. He pulled out a folder with printouts and projections and maps showing how the area was expanding. Then he slid a number across the tailgate of my truck. It was insulting. I'm talking maybe 60% of what the land was actually worth, and that's being generous. He presented it like he was doing me a favor, like I should be grateful someone noticed my little ranch. I told him no, politely, firmly. He smiled and said to think about it, left his car, drove off. 3 days later, different guy. Same story, different company name, same low offer. I said no again. Then a week after that, another one. Now at this point, I'm starting to see the pattern. These weren't random buyers. This was coordinated. Someone wanted my land badly enough to send multiple people pretending to be independent offers. And every time I said no, the tone changed just a little bit. The offers got slightly more aggressive. The language got a little less friendly. One guy hinted that development was happening whether I liked it or not, that it would be smarter to sell now while I still had leverage. Another one suggested that holding out would only make things harder for me in the long run. That last part stuck with me. Harder for me how exactly? I started asking questions. Who are you really working for? Who's funding this? Why my land specifically? Nobody gave me a straight answer, but I noticed something else during this time. The fake HOA letters kept coming. Violation notices for things that didn't even exist on my property. Fines for non-compliance with rules I never agreed to follow. And right around the same time those letters increased, that's when the vehicles started showing up, uninvited, unannounced, driving right through my land like they had every right to be there. The first time it happened, I thought maybe it was a mistake. I was out checking fence line on the north end of the property when I saw dust kicking up near the access road that cuts through the middle of my ranch. That road isn't public. It's on my land. It's private, but there was a white truck driving down it anyway. I drove over to see what was going on. The truck had a magnetic sign on the door that said Ridgeline Property Enforcement. Same name as the fake HOA. There were 2 guys inside. They didn't look like they were lost. They looked like they were surveying. I flagged them down and asked what they were doing on my property. The driver said they were conducting a routine community inspection. I told him this was private land, that there is no community here, that he needed to leave immediately. He just nodded, smiled, and drove off. I thought that was the end of it. It wasn't. 3 days later, same truck, different route, driving along my southern fence line this time. I wasn't even there to stop them. I only knew because I found fresh tire tracks in the dirt. So I put up signs, big ones, bright orange. No trespassing, private property, violators will be prosecuted. They came back anyway, and then it got worse. Because it wasn't just the HOA trucks anymore. Local police vehicles started using my land as a cut-through. Sheriff's deputies, patrol cars, driving right past my signs like they didn't exist. I'm talking marked vehicles with lights on top. People who are supposed to enforce the law, casually ignoring my clearly posted property rights. At first it was once or twice a week. Then it became almost daily. I started keeping a log, date, time, vehicle description, license plate when I could get it. I took photos, I took video. I documented everything because I had this sinking feeling I was going to need proof later. I called the sheriff's office directly and asked why their deputies were driving through my private ranch. The woman on the phone said she'd passed the message along. Nothing changed. I put up a chain across the access road. Someone cut it. I put up another one with a padlock. They cut that one too. It was like my property rights just didn't matter anymore. Like something bigger than me had already decided what was going to happen to my land, and I was just in the way. I wasn't going to just sit there and take it, so I hired a lawyer, not some big expensive firm, just a local attorney who handled property disputes. I showed him everything. The fake HOA letters, the trespassing logs, the photos, the cut chains, all of it. He listened, took notes, and told me what I already suspected: none of this was legal. The HOA had no legitimate authority. The vehicles had no right to be on my land, and if there was an easement or right-of-way claimed anywhere on my property, they were legally required to show proof. He drafted a cease and desist letter. It was clear, it was professional, it cited the law. It demanded they stop entering my property immediately and provide any documentation supporting their claimed access rights. We sent it certified mail to the Ridgeline Property Association. We sent copies to the sheriff's department. We waited. The HOA never responded, not once. The trespassing didn't stop either. If anything, it got more blatant. Like the letter had annoyed them instead of warned them. So my lawyer sent a second letter, stronger this time, threatening legal action if they continued. Still nothing. I went to the sheriff's office in person. I brought my documentation. I brought the lawyer's letters. I sat down with a deputy and explained the whole situation as calmly as I could. He looked over the papers. He nodded along, and then he said something that made my blood boil. He said the deputies were using that route because it was a faster response path between two parts of the county. He claimed it had been used that way for years, that it was considered an informal right-of-way. I asked him to show me the easement paperwork. He couldn't. I asked him to show me any documented agreement that gave law enforcement access to my private land. He said he'd have to check with someone higher up. I never heard back. My lawyer pushed harder. He requested official records. He filed freedom of information requests. He demanded proof of any legal right-of-way across my property. Nothing ever came back, because it didn't exist. There was no easement, no agreement, no legal right, just people with power acting like my ownership didn't matter. And the worst part, nobody seemed willing to stop them. There was one day that changed everything. I was moving cattle from the east pasture to the west side. It's a process. You can't rush it. You have to move slow and keep the herd calm. I had about 40 head walking in a line along the access road, the same road these people kept driving through. I was almost done, maybe 10 minutes from getting them through the gate. Then I heard an engine. A black SUV came barreling down that road, fast, way too fast for a dirt path on a working ranch. I started waving my arms trying to get them to stop. To slow down at the very least. They didn't. The cattle spooked. They scattered in every direction, calves separated from their mothers. A few crashed through a section of fence I just repaired the week before. One cow slipped in the ditch and went down hard on her front legs. It took me 4 hours to round them all back up. The cow that fell was limping for 3 days after, and that SUV, it just kept driving, didn't stop, didn't even slow down, like what they just did didn't matter at all. I stood there in the middle of my own land covered in dust and sweat watching them disappear over the hill, and something inside me just snapped. I was done asking nicely. Done waiting for the system to work. Done trusting that someone else was going to step in and protect my rights, because nobody was coming. The sheriff wasn't going to help. The county didn't care. The fake HOA was going to keep doing whatever they wanted, and these developers were going to keep squeezing until I either gave up or lost everything trying to fight back the slow way. I went inside. I sat down at my computer, and I started researching, not about how to file complaints or who to call next. I started researching property law, real property law. The kind that tells you exactly what you can and cannot do on your own private land when someone refuses to respect it. And that's when I found something interesting. Something none of these people thought I'd actually do. Something completely legal but extremely effective. I could physically block access to my land, permanently. I spent 3 days reading everything I could find. Court cases about property rights, state laws about easements and trespassing, precedents where landowners successfully blocked unauthorized access, forum posts from other people who dealt with similar situations, and the more I read, the clearer it became. If there's no legal easement on your land and nobody can produce documentation proving otherwise, you have every right to block access. You can put up gates. You can install barriers. You can make it physically impossible for people to drive through. It's your land. You're right. But I needed to be sure, because I knew the second I did this, there was going to be a fight. And I couldn't afford to be wrong. So I called a different lawyer, not the guy I used before. This time I found someone who specialized specifically in property rights and land use law. Someone who'd handled cases against HOAs and local governments. I explained everything. He asked good questions. He reviewed my deed. He checked county records for any registered easements. Then he told me exactly what I needed to hear. There was no easement, no right of way, no legal access granted to anyone. And as long as I wasn't blocking a public road or violating any zoning laws, I was completely within my rights to install physical barriers on my own property. He said it clearly. If you want to put bollards across that access road, you can. And if anyone has a problem with it, they'll have to prove in court they have a right to be there. Which, based on what I'm seeing, they can't. That was all I needed. I ordered the bollards that same afternoon, steel, commercial grade. The kind they use outside government buildings and airports to stop vehicles. 8 feet tall, sunk 4 feet into concrete, painted bright yellow so nobody could claim they didn't see them. I ordered 6 of them. I mapped out exactly where they'd go, right across the main access road, spaced perfectly to block any vehicle from squeezing through, close enough to be impassable, far enough apart that I could still walk between them if I needed to. I scheduled the installation for the following Wednesday, and I didn't tell a single soul. The concrete trucks arrived at 7 in the morning. I'd already marked the spots with paint. 6 perfectly measured locations across that access road. The concrete crew knew what they were doing. They drilled the holes, mixed the concrete, started setting those bollards one by one. By noon, they were all in place. Those yellow steel posts stood there like sentinels, impossible to miss. Impossible to drive around, impossible to ignore. I stood back and looked at what I'd just done, and I felt something I hadn't felt in months: control. For the first time since this whole nightmare started, I had actually taken action that meant something. Not begging authorities to help, not sending letters that got ignored, not hoping the system would work. I'd solved it myself, legally, but I knew the peace wouldn't last long. By 2 o'clock that afternoon, I got a call from the sheriff's office. They'd heard about the Bollards. Someone had driven up to them and immediately called it in. The deputy on the phone asked what in the hell I thought I was doing. Said I needed to remove them immediately or I'd be in violation of county ordinances. I asked him which ordinances. He couldn't name them specifically. I told him to come out and cite me if he wanted to, but he was going to find that everything I did was completely legal. He said he'd have to check with the county. 2 hours later, a different deputy showed up at my gate. This one had a supervisor with him. They drove right up to those bollards and just stared at them. The supervisor got out and walked the perimeter, checked the measurements, looked at the paint marks on the ground. He turned to me and asked me point blank, "Do you have the right to do this?" I said yes. I showed him my deed. I showed him the lawyer's letter confirming I had no easements on my property. I showed him my documentation of all the trespassing. He studied it all carefully. Then he said something I didn't expect. "Legally, yeah, you're right. There's no documented right-of-way here. If there was one, it would be recorded, and it's not." The deputy looked shocked. The supervisor said they couldn't force me to remove them. That if the HOA or anyone else wanted to challenge me, they'd have to take it to court and prove they had a legal right to cross my land, which they couldn't do, because the right didn't exist. For the first time, someone official had finally admitted it. The trespassing stopped immediately. Not a single vehicle came through after those bollards went up, not the fake HOA trucks, not the police cruisers, not the surveyors, nobody. That access road sat completely empty for the first time in months, and the silence was incredible, but I knew they weren't going to just let it go. People who push this hard don't walk away quietly. Sure enough, 3 weeks later I got served. The Ridgeland Community Property Association filed a lawsuit against me. They claimed I was blocking a historic community access route, that my bollards were a public safety hazard, that I was interfering with essential county services. It all sounded official. It all sounded serious, but my lawyer tore it apart in about 15 minutes. He filed a response that was calm and devastating. He asked them to produce the easement, produce the recorded right-of-way, produce any documentation showing this so-called historic access route ever legally existed. They had nothing. We went to a hearing. The judge reviewed everything. He looked at my deed. He looked at the county records. He looked at their complete lack of evidence. Then he dismissed the case. He didn't just rule in my favor. He actually lectured their attorney about filing frivolous lawsuits and wasting the court's time. Said that property rights are not suggestions. That you can't just claim access to someone's private land because it's convenient. It was over. The fake HOA went quiet after that. No more letters, no more violation notices, no more threats. And the development group, they disappeared too. Turns out the whole plan depended on access through my land. Without that shortcut, without being able to move equipment and materials across my property, the development wasn't nearly as profitable. They'd have to build new roads, reroute infrastructure, spend money they didn't want to spend, so they moved on to an easier target somewhere else. My ranch was safe, not because the system protected me, not because anyone in power decided to do the right thing, but because I stood my ground, because I knew my rights, and because I was willing to do what it took legally to defend what was mine. Those yellow bollards are still standing today, and every time I drive past them, I'm reminded of something important. This isn't just my story. I've learned since all this happened that what I went through, it's happening to people all across the country, right now, today. Fake HOAs appearing out of nowhere with no legitimate authority. Developers working behind the scenes trying to acquire land. Local governments that won't protect property rights because they're too busy looking the other way. People getting pressured and intimidated into selling land that's been in their families for generations. The tactics are always the same. First comes the official-looking letter from an organization you've never heard of. Then come the visits from friendly guys in suits with lowball offers. When you say no, the tone shifts. Suddenly there are violations, fines, trespassing, harassment that just won't stop. Most people give in. They're exhausted, they're frustrated, they're scared of legal battles they can't afford. And they're tired of fighting alone against something that looks and sounds official even when it isn't. So they sell. They walk away from their land, from their investment, from their freedom. And the people behind this move on to the next property, the next target, the next person they can pressure into giving up. But here's what I learned through this whole nightmare. You have more power than you think. Documentation matters. Every single interaction, every trespassing incident, every letter, every phone call, write it down, take photos, keep records. Because when this goes to a legal battle, your evidence is your weapon. Know your property rights. Actually know them. Not from what someone tells you. Read your deed. Check the county records yourself. Understand what easements are and whether you have any. Talk to a property rights lawyer, not just any lawyer, someone who specializes in this. Don't trust officials to do the right thing automatically. Push them. Make them prove things. Ask for documentation. File freedom of information requests. Be the squeaky wheel. Because sometimes the system only works when people force it to. And stand your ground legally. There are ways to protect what's yours that don't require violence or breaking laws. Bollards, gates, fencing, legal letters, court filings. You have options. Use them. My ranch is still here, still mine, still peaceful. And it stayed that way because I refused to accept that someone else's greed got to override my rights. Your land is yours. Don't forget that.